The man gathers his energy in his right hand. Then, he lifted the seal on his chest. Unexpectedly, in the next second, his entire body's muscles began to swell, like a balloon at an incredible speed. Seeing the man's biceps about to crush his own skull, even his opponent was terrified that he might kill himself. Then, with a furious roar, slewed, suddenly, behind him appeared a Valkyrie even taller than he was. Through fusion with the Valkyrie's divine weapon, he formed an ultra-muscular exoskeleton. At last, he could fully control his immense muscles, and at this moment, with all restraints lifted, he had undoubtedly become the most muscular man in human history. It turns out that in the 5th battle of Ragnarok, to counter the god's representative, the supreme Hindu god Shiva, the Valkyries sought out a legendary sumo wrestler from Japan, Raiden Tamimin. As the referee's signal for battle echoed through the arena, Shiva was already prepared to strike. Meanwhile, Raiden calmly picked up a handful of salt. He took a deep breath and scattered the salt into the air. Completing the traditional sumo ritual before battle, Shiva patiently waited for Raiden to finish. In return, Raiden decided to give him an attack with a little flavor. He immediately charged at Shiva, moving so fast that Shiva couldn't react in time. In the blink of an eye, a massive foot landed on his face, as if trying to suffocate him with foot odor. But as a god born and raised in India, such a minor annoyance was nothing to the king of the Ganges. Seeing this, Raiden launched another fierce attack. A powerful uppercut was blocked by Shiva's 2 hands. But then, a spinning Russian hook landed right on his face. Shiva's head jerked back. Raiden prepared to send him flying to meet Buddha. But Shiva's 4 arms weren't just for show. Not only did they block Raiden's knee strike, but they also grabbed his hands. Then, Shiva unleashed a double dragon heart strike. But it was clear that both of them knew these ordinary moves alone weren't enough to defeat each other. So Raiden prepared to release his body's seals, entering his strongest form to battle Shiva. Ever since birth, Raiden had struggled to control his immense power. At 3 years old, he still couldn't walk. His mother even thought he was born disabled. Then, one day, when she returned home, she was shocked to see her son standing up on his own. Overjoyed, she rushed forward to embrace him. Raiden also wanted to hug his mother back. But the moment he took a step, a searing, unbearable pain made him instantly lose consciousness. It was then that his mother realized his exaggerated muscles had completely crushed his bones into dust. After many attempts, she finally found a way to keep her son alive. She had to make him get used to the pain, allowing his bones to shatter and heal repeatedly, until he developed stronger, more resilient bones. Through this agonizing process, Raiden learned how to seal his own muscles. But in doing so, he also suppressed his true strength. But now, facing Shiva, he needed to rely on his innate divine power. After completely releasing the seals, Raiden had never felt such immense strength before. At the same time, he warned Shiva, "You better not die from a single punch." Even Zeus had never been humiliated like this. But in the next moment, the power Raiden displayed made Shiva realize that his opponent wasn't bluffing. With just an ordinary punch, even using all 4 arms, Shiva couldn't block it. Before he could land, Raiden unleashed a flurry of punches. Shiva could only endure it with sheer toughness. Finally, Raiden finished with a devastating Juichi Manji strike, almost taking Shiva's life. Seeing Raiden at full power, even the gods began to worry about Shiva's condition. Watching him struggle to stand up, Raiden grabbed his head, ready to finish him off with a headbutt. But to his surprise, Shiva charged forward instead. It turned out that Shiva had absolute confidence in the hardness of his skull. Seizing the moment, he caught Raiden off guard. What followed was Shiva's fierce counterattack. Utilizing the advantage of his 4 arms, his fists rained down on Raiden like meteors. Spectators watching saw Raiden blocking effortlessly, thinking Shiva's punches weren't that powerful. But to experienced sumo wrestlers, each of Shiva's punches was as heavy as a mountain. Raiden was steadily pushed back. Spectators began to worry about his situation. However, just as Shiva finished his attack sequence and was about to take a brief rest, Raiden seized the moment and grabbed one of Shiva's arms. Shiva immediately sensed danger, but Raiden had no intention of letting go. He channeled all his muscle power into his arms. Then came the sound of flesh tearing apart. Raiden had crushed Shiva's arm with sheer force. Shiva hastily kicked Raiden away, but as the bloodied arm fell to the ground, the gods watching almost dropped their jaws in shock. They couldn't comprehend how Raiden suddenly displayed such immense power. But the Valkyries understood. It was all thanks to the divine weapon, forged by the third sister. The ultra-muscular exoskeleton allowed Raiden. And so, the scene of him tearing apart a god king unfolded. Raiden himself hadn't expected this move to be so powerful. The gods began to pray, fearing a third consecutive loss for their side. Yet, even as everyone lost faith in Shiva, there were still those who firmly believed in him. They were once his sworn enemies. Shiva had stepped over their corpses to become the god king. Yet, they still had faith in him. Faith in the strongest warrior of India. They knew he wouldn't give up so easily. Well, there's no other way. After all, I am the strongest. With force behind his fists, his body began to emit a strange flame. He actively launched an attack on Raiden. However, having lost an arm, his balance was clearly compromised. He couldn't even land a hit on Raiden. But unexpectedly, his true goal was to bait Raiden into attacking him. Then, he struck back with an attack heavier than any before. The sheer force made even Raiden struggle to withstand it. Carrying the hopes of the Indian gods, Shiva continued provoking Raiden into attacking. Yet, despite Raiden landing hundreds, even thousands of punches, none of them matched the sheer impact of a single blow from Shiva. Seizing the moment, Shiva slammed his head into Raiden. Unwilling to be outdone, Raiden struck back. And so, in front of everyone, these two stubborn warriors grabbed each other's heads and clashed in a brutal standoff. A true fight between men, simple, direct, and savage. For a full 2.5 hours, they kept smashing their heads together until they were both dazed. Realizing how tenacious Raiden was, Shiva knew he had no choice but to unleash his ultimate move. And so, he suddenly started dancing an Indian dance. The audience was completely bewildered. But Zeus immediately recognized it. It was the legendary war dance, India's ultimate treasure. As expected, on the battlefield, Shiva's movements became increasingly unpredictable. Raiden couldn't land a single hit. He was forced to take every incoming blow. Unwilling to keep taking hits, Raiden focused all his muscles into his legs, and unleashed his lion dance technique. Yet, even that couldn't touch Shiva. What followed was Shiva's relentless assault on Raiden, because she saw that Raiden had gathered his muscles into his arms, using them as shields. With this, he could remain undefeated. But strangely, Shiva's body now burned like a furnace. His temperature kept rising. Finally, he saw an opening and kicked Raiden's arms aside. Then, with his tiger claw flame dance, he tore into Raiden's body, burning away most of the skin on his face. The excruciating pain didn't make Raiden nervous or fearful. Instead, he grew even more excited for the fight ahead, because he was about to release his second seal, his ultimate technique, Sumo Four Hands. Back then, even after sealing his muscles, Raiden's strength was still far beyond any ordinary human. By chance, he was introduced to sumo wrestling. But because of his overwhelming strength, his peers saw him as a monster. No one wanted to be his friend. He resented the gods for giving him this body. Luckily, his mother comforted him, saying, "The gods gave you this body as a gift. They want you to use your strength to help the weak." From his mother's gentle encouragement, Raiden slowly began to accept himself. In the years that followed, Raiden became the most helpful person in his village. He thought he would live an ordinary life. But then, disaster struck. For years, the village suffered from famine. To find a way to save his village, he traveled to Edo, the most prosperous city in Japan. There, he learned that sumo wrestlers could earn great wealth. So he sought out an opportunity to join a dojo, and began training professionally. But out of fear of hurting his fellow disciples, he never dared to show his full strength. Seeing this, Raiden's master personally stepped in. And in that battle, Raiden finally experienced the true essence of sumo. Sumo wasn't just about brute strength. Time and again, his master knocked him down, yet he kept getting up. Even when exhausted, he never managed to land a single hit. But his master saw Raiden's true potential. And so, in the days that followed, he meticulously taught Raiden the 48 sumo techniques. A year later, Raiden finally got his first match. And as expected, Raiden won his debut battle by throwing his opponent out of the ring in a single move. From that moment on, Raiden became a legend in the world of sumo. In the hundreds of matches that followed, not a single opponent lasted beyond his second move. He won more and more money and food for his hometown. But the good times didn't last long. One day, during a match, his opponent's legs gave out before the fight even began. The look of fear in the man's eyes instantly reminded Raiden of his childhood. Afraid of becoming a monster in others' eyes again, he deliberately lost the match. But this act was seen as an insult to the god of sumo. His master wanted to punish him. But upon seeing Raiden's tear-filled eyes, he finally understood the reason behind Raiden's surrender. Even so, his master didn't want him to give up sumo. And so, from that day forward, Raiden sealed away his strongest technique, sumo forehands. Yet, even with this limitation, due to the weakness of his opponents, he never lost a single match in his entire career. But now, to defeat Shiva, he had to unleash sumo forehands. Seeing Raiden assume a serious offensive stance, Shiva braced himself. Raiden gathered energy into his right hand, then moved his muscles to his legs. In an instant, he dashed toward Shiva. Before Shiva could react, Raiden unleashed his full-body muscle attack, Yatagarasu. Even with both arms blocking, Shiva's arms were shattered and the force struck his face. Now, the four-armed Shiva had only one arm left. The youngest Valkyrie thought it was over. But then, Shiva got back up again. The war god couldn't understand the power behind Raiden's strike. But Zeus explained that Yatagarasu strike just now was nearly on par with my fist beyond time. The moment it landed, it absorbed all sound in the arena. That's not a technique any ordinary human can perform. But on the battlefield, Raiden was also suffering the consequences. His muscles began to rupture inch by inch. Only his ultra-muscular exoskeleton kept him standing. Perhaps, the moment the divine weapon was undone, Raiden's body would instantly be torn apart. But he had no regrets using this move. In his past life, he never had the chance to wield such strength nor face a worthy opponent. But in this life, the opportunity was right before him and he would fight to the death without regret. The Valkyrie was moved by Raiden's determination. Even if it cost her everything, she would let him fight to his heart's content. It had been so long since he faced such a worthy opponent. But in the next second, Shiva felt it too. The power of the gods behind him. It was the unwavering faith of 1,116 Indian gods. This was a battle he absolutely could not lose. I am the pillar of the Indian gods. He plunged his right hand into his chest, forcing his fingers to accelerate his heartbeat. Shiva's body gradually turned red hot. It was said that when Shiva opened all 5 of his eyes, it marked the moment he would destroy the world. His entire body was engulfed in hellfire. Anything that touched him would be instantly incinerated. Both fighters had now reached their ultimate forms. A battle between muscle and fire had begun. With each attack and defense, Raiden's muscles burned away bit by bit. The gods believed that as long as Shiva held firm, he would eventually win this fight. But Hermes saw through it instantly. Shiva's flames were also consuming his own body. Would Raiden's muscles be burned away first? Or would Shiva burn himself to death first? No one could tell. Shiva attempted to wear Raiden down with his agile war dance. But Raiden nearly caught him mid-movement. It was clear there could be no moments of hesitation. After dozens of exchanged blows, both of their bodies were nearing their limits. Raiden's body could only withstand one last attack. He proposed a final clash using Yatagarasu to settle it. The battle-hardened Shiva accepted the challenge. In their final exchange, Shiva's body of destruction ultimately prevailed. With his heel, he burned straight through Raiden's arm. Raiden was still alive, but he honored the agreement he made with Shiva. He instructed the Valkyrie to dissolve their fusion. She wanted to give him a chance to live. But Sludge told him, I decided a long time ago that I would stay with the one I love until the very end. She chose to die with Raiden. Shiva respected their decision. With a single strike, he severed Raiden's head. Thus, in the 5th battle of Ragnarok, the supreme Hindu god, Shiva, claimed victory. And so, the battle came to an end.